Now we're going to take a look at some of the numbers behind New York City specialized high schools and their diversity issues. First slide here, I can let you know that there are 9 specialized high schools in the New York City public school system, with some ranking Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, and Brooklyn Tech as the top 3. Down here at the bottom, I want to show you that Fiorello LaGuardia, the famed school, famous for music and arts and performing, has a little asterisk because it is a specialized high school, but unlike these others, you audition your way into LaGuardia, so the test isn't as standard, a little more subjective than the other 8 schools on the list. Going forward here, I can show you that in 2016, admissions to New York City's 8 other specialized high schools broke down like this. There are nearly 27,000 students who took the specialized exam. 19% of those were actually accepted and placed into a school. 34% of those students were Asian Americans, and with the fewest percentage by far is black students, who made up about 3% of those who were actually placed in a school after taking that test. Just over 5% of those students were Hispanic. Stuyvesant High School accepted 9 black students overall, and really at the bottom of the barrel, no black students were accepted at the Staten Island Tech. Moving forward, going to show you disparities in the system here. Now, there were 80,000 students who competed for approximately 5,200 available spots in those specialized high schools this year. 75% of those public school students are black or Latino. That's the entire makeup of the school system. But only 12% of that larger body found their way to a seat in a specialized school. 11.5% of schools fed 35% of those offers. And you can see at this bottom here that that leaves 84% of schools got only 15% of offers to enter a specialized school, where the lion's share, 75% of the students who took up spaces at those schools, came from only 12% of, I've screwed up the numbers here, 4.5% of middle schools. That's a tiny percentage. 4% of all the schools fed 50% of all students at specialized high schools. Going to clean it up for this last slide here. And over 50% of students receiving offers to gifted and talented programs came from schools that, their elementary schools had gifted and talented programs. They made up 50% of the folks who are in specialized high schools. And several neighborhoods send fewer than 10 students each year to a specialized high school. And those with the lowest representation of all were the poorest communities in the city. So let's get into the A block.
Here to give us some perspective on why so few seats are filled by Black and Latino students and what can be done to help increase the level of diversity are Esmeralda Simmons, Executive Director of the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College. Always great to see you here, Esmeralda.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming back.
Yes.
And Kimberly Denise Williams, member of the Stuyvesant High School Black Alumni Association's Diversity Initiative. Welcome, Kimberly. Thank you so much for being here. That must have been really scary to see that number for this year. 9.
It was, well, since I've been following this for some time, it wasn't as shocking, but it was, as always, disheartening to see that number and just to see that it's just been going down continuously over the year. So 9 is the same number that we had last year, but it's definitely a new low for us. In contemporary times.
So give us a little bit of background on how people apply for these schools. We learned a little bit in the slides, but just so we know the whole process.
It's quite simple, but it's very complex. The simplicity of it is that the New York City Department of Education offers an exam. The students have to sign up for the exam, and then they sit for the test, an all-day test, sometime in November and December. But that's the simplicity of it. The complexity of it is that there are some parents who are preparing their students to take that exam before they enter pre-K.
From birth.
From birth.
From birth.
This is no joke. This is real. I'm one of those parents. You're deciding where your parent, what is the track? I'm using the horrible word. What is the track that's going to get my student, my child, into this free private school that's also the launching pad for the Ivy Leagues and a successful career? So parents that 11% you saw of schools that are sending, parents seek out those schools. In order to get into those schools, they see what schools feed into those schools. They get their children into pre-kindergarten prep courses. They're coaching their children on how to get into the gifted and talented program. And here's the horrible part. There are some parts in Brooklyn, some districts in Brooklyn, zero gifted and talented programs. Zero. And a former mayor, Bloomberg, said, well, there's no gifted and talented preschool in the Bedside area because nobody tested into it. Well, I hate to say it, maybe those parents couldn't afford the test prep for their 3-year-old.
Right. So where is the disconnect then? If we're looking at this standardized test, it would seem that it happens long before the point where you get into high school,
there to take it.
The test is proof of that there is something broken along the way. So does the disparity begin like sincerely at a time when you're 3 years old about to enter pre-K?
Yes. That's true. That's how it happens.
It is a starting point for a lot of it, and there are points along the way where you can break it, right? So because you don't get into a gifted and talented program doesn't mean that you're never going to get into
So
what's
what disrupts that chain then? How do you break that or break into another track if it's
So what I advise parents to do is to, when they see that their students are not on a track or in a regular public school just doing regular things, to let them know that number one, the test that these children will be taking is not covering the material that the students get in school. It is way beyond that. So that means that they must do test prep for that exam. It's an exam that's not aligned with the core curriculum. And that's the only criteria. And you should all know that my center, along with Latino Justice and the NAACP League Defense Fund, has filed a lawsuit with some very, very high prestigious clients like CSS and Make the Road against this test as being discriminatory. But to answer your question directly, parents then need to give their children the boost outside of their regular public school by either tutoring or test prep or moving them out of the school to interrupt the track that they're on and try to get them prepared for more rigorous coursework that they would have in one of these specialized high schools or other top-tier schools that are not even among the 9 specialized high schools.
But Kimberly, if you're a member of the Black alumnus from Stuyvesant, one of the schools here, how do you make it a white person's problem that people of color, particularly African Americans, aren't getting into these schools? Because it seems like if you're just out there yelling by yourself, no one cares. How do you build those coalitions or let people who aren't black know that this is gonna be a problem for you?
So my first response to that is it is becoming a white people's problem, but not necessarily for pure reasons, and it's because the number of Asian students in the school has jumped up a lot. And
the white folks.
So white numbers are dropping, and for some people that is very disheartening, and it's expressed in very coded language that, well, something needs to change, and that's how you get into a lot of the reform discussions. But also just to know that it's something where this is an issue with diversity across all areas, so not just in schools. Like, diversity is not the problem of the minority alone. It's a problem for the entire society, and actually it benefits white people more to have, like, and it's been proven in business, in creative industries time and time again. Productivity is increased, creativity is better, and you have a better system when you have a diverse background. It prepares you to work with different people, and it also just gives your child an exposure to the real New York that they will not otherwise see. So it's something that affects all of our children, and also when you look at where a lot of New York's workforce is coming from, you want New York to prepare bright students so that the city that you're living in when you are old and no longer working has
tax base for one.
A tax base, definitely, and a great workforce. You're going to want the people who are serving you in service industries, from service industries to professional industries. this is who you're preparing for the future. So it doesn't behoove you to exclude a complete population out when they're making up 70% of the school system in the first place.
So is there a way to do it in K through 7 that maybe doesn't involve parents? Let's say parents aren't involved. Let's say we can't get rid of the exam. What do you see happening? What can we do?
Well, there's been a proposal that's been circulated from the Community Service Society, which is one of the clients in the lawsuit, to resolve this by using what is called the Texas model. In other words, you take a certain percent of the top students in every school and offer them a spot in, I'm talking about middle school, and offer them a spot in the science techs or one of the specialized high schools. That's a proposal, and merely a proposal. I think it's a good idea. It will not eliminate the test because they said they want the vast lion's share to still go to people who just test in, but to preserve a little bit in a city that is majority people of color. We're going to reserve maybe 12% for this diversity effort. But it's a beginning.
It's a beginning.
It's a beginning. It has done wonders for the Texas University school system.
Yes, it has.
And I think New York City needs to do something. Of course, the mayor made this a campaign promise, and now we're coming up to the end of the first term, and I would like to see this mayor, who I've supported across the board, to do something about diversity in the specialized high school. He knows it's a problem. His son, in fact, goes to Brooklyn Tech. He knows it's a problem.
And there are things that can also be done. So changing the admissions process is one that's definitely been very contested, but at this point it's looking like it might be something that we have to do, and we being New York State and New York City. We can also look at exposure from early ages. So looking at that whole feeder process, if nothing else changes, and we need parents to be informed, to know about the gifted and talented programs, and to push their way. And yes, it's going to be a fight, but to push their way into those programs, to even get tested and to be in these systems. There are other options that people have floated around there. So the number this year dropped off, I think 500 fewer Black and Hispanic students took the test this year than last year. So there have been discussions on making the test an opt-out instead of an opt-in, mandatory, offering it during the school day. So instead of currently you go on a Saturday or a Sunday, what if you offer the test during the school day so
and
that
let's
you
just skip this whole, I need to let you know, oh, you didn't know, did we tell you about it, did we tell your parents, did we tell anybody?
A guidance counselor didn't tell your parents about it. You know?
Yeah.
So Kimberly, for those who have cleared this bar and are now at these specialized schools, what's the environment like for them? I know like a lot of us who went to college campuses always had this sort of specter of affirmative action, like you didn't earn your spot following you around, but what's it like for the students who are in schools now?
So that is probably the only benefit that the test gives you. And I can say even when I was at Stuyvesant and people would say things like, well, you obviously got here because of affirmative action. And I would be like, we all took a test.
These are the specialized
Like we took it, like there was no other path for me to get in. So whether or not you belong there isn't as much of an issue, but there are several microaggressions that these students face day to day from teachers as well as from their peers. And so there are assumptions that you must be or act a certain way because you're attending one of these schools, or also the assumptions that, well, because you come from a neighborhood that I don't visit, but I have this idea of. So you come from Flatbush, or you come from Bed-Stuy, or from Bushwick, or Brownsville, and I'm naming Brooklyn neighborhoods because it's a Brooklyn station. But, well, you must act like this, or, well, why aren't your pants sagging, and things of that nature. And this is what they're getting from their peers. So it can be a very isolating and exclusionary experience. If you saw recently Black at Tech, trended on social media with tech students just explaining the horrible experiences that they had, and a lot of it dealing with teachers at the school. And that can also be a very horrible and isolating experience. You're talking about 9 kids in 1 year. That means you can go your day without seeing another Black student unless you seek them out, which is just not the norm in a school like this. But there are also teachers and programs out there where they are reaching out to these students. They're providing them with a bit more support and just, I'm an heir to be there. And the students are also building their own communities. That doesn't exclude them from the rest of the school. So, they're still in clubs with everybody else. They do the speech team. They do the wonderful dorky things that you can do at a specialized high school that may not be as well funded in other New York City public high schools. That's another issue in and of itself. But they get to have that
anime club.
I just
that
want to
moment of
point out too is that when we have these conversations, we don't often have them with people of color around the table talking about the lack of diversity in these schools. And to hear that number of Asian students who are now really making their way into specialized schools with force, the irony and the fact that this sort of model minority myth is going to be put forth that much more may change the whole way that the formula works.
It depends on which Asian students you're talking about and whether their parents forked out for 4 or 5 years of test prep. And huge amounts of money. It's a private test preparation, which went on during the week and Saturdays and Sundays. So the investment is huge.
How much are we talking? Like, how much cash would it be to get your kid from like
$5,000 to $10,000 at least
for the lifetime of that education?
No. For test prep, $5,000 to $10,000 if you do
grade?
for one student.
But my 7th grade year? My parents could spend $10,000 for the life of my education.
For the life of your prep for that test.
All the different.
So that means from entering the public school system up
when
until
you
I
started.
took
So
the
let's say you start in the 5th grade.
Gotcha.
And you're doing 1 day a week plus Saturday, and then 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. It's the equivalent of a year of private.
But
tuition.
it's cheaper than tuition if you get into the high school.
Exactly. Thank you. I also want to mention the fact that there are this isolating factor. My sister went to Stuyvesant in the 70s.
Right.
I'm sorry, went to Bronx Science in the 70s. And one of my sons went to Tech, and the other one passed over going to Bronx Science because he said he didn't want to be the only student coming from Flatbush. And he went to Med-Sci at Midwood. We talked about it last night, and he said that was one of the best decisions he ever made was to go to this other school that was closer to our home and not as isolating. My sister complained about the isolation from the first day to the last day, and she says it's only gotten worse. There were more black kids then than there are now.
That's true.
There are now. Than there are now. But this has been a continuing pattern, and the lack of diversity leads to some serious depression, questions about your self-worth. And when people are pouring it on outside of yourself, it becomes even more apparent.
Well, that's going to be the final word. Thank you. Run us right up into the end.
That's right. It'll have to be a continued conversation as always.
Keep watching.